Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Some people simply have no limit to their insolence. More details in the first story. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. My sister needed a job. My sister, unqualified, is looking for a job. She's open to anything. She's broke, hasn't paid her rent in a month, and is borrowing money from my mother, which she has no way of paying back. I know there's a few openings available at work, so I speak to the CEO and put in a good word in the hopes that she'll get a job and stop taking money from my mother. My sister gets offered a community-based job, full-time, 40 hours, paying about $24 an hour, above average wage in my country. She's offered flexible hours to work around her kids, and she can bring them to work after school so she doesn't have to pay childcare. Free healthcare is also included as there's a clinic on site, amongst other perks. Overall, a great place to work. In true form, my sister questions the salary and requests an hourly rate of between $30 to $36 per hour, as working in the community is a hard job. This is more than even my boss gets paid. She then requests to work only 6 hours a day instead of 8-hour days because she doesn't think she can make full-time hours work. The CEO declines her request. She emails him saying she feels she's worth more and has other opportunities elsewhere. She still hasn't got a job. I'm humiliated that I put my name out there for it, but that despite her begging for any good job opportunity, she still managed to F it up. Make sure to apologize to your boss and clear the air with him. Make sure he knows that you feel like your sister was unreasonable. And our second story. Debt collectors want to see my father-in-law. Thursday afternoon, while I'm loading my van in the wife's car, I noticed two men in suits standing at the bottom of my driveway by my locked gate. I walked towards them, and as I got close, they shouted, asking to see dead father-in-law. I explained that he's dead and asked which debt collector agency they worked for, same as the last two times. I pulled out my phone and contacted the same person I spoke to last time that claimed this wouldn't happen again. I'm then told that dead father-in-law called the police and spoke to a different person and that the debt was able to be paid or collected in full. I then hang up and head back to the house again to collect the ashes, death certificate, and the email from the collectors. I jump in my car and drive off out one of the other exits from my small farm. Takes about an hour and 45 minutes to drive to the office because I live well out in the middle of nowhere. I walked into the office about 2:30 and asked to see the manager and whoever is above her. I'm kept waiting about 30 minutes and then asked to go to an office of the big boss. The big boss asks why I'm dealing with this rather than having my father-in-law come in and sort it out like a man. I pull out his bag of ashes and dump the entire contents onto his desk and replied with the, "Here, now effing deal with them." I also then pulled out the death certificate and email and dumped them in front of him, all while the manager I spoke to, had email dealings with, stood silently behind him. Big Boss turns to the manager and asks if this is true, and nothing, just silence. The Big Boss turns back to me and apologizes for the mix-up and issues and has promised this will not happen again, then asks if I'm going to clean the ashes off his desk. I say no because he was rude about dead father-in-law, so it's down to them to sort and turn to walk out of the office. By the time I'd gotten 15 to 20 meters away from the office, the receptionist comes running up with the bag of ashes. Apparently, Big Boss made the manager tidy it up and was now shouting and screaming. I get home and have an email waiting from Big Boss, basically for all the crap wife and I have just been through. He's going to give us double what they were demanding in form of an apology and has written off the debt, meaning it can't be sold on or anything like that. Let's just hope that this is truly the last time I have to deal with this crap. Had a good weekend at the festival, sold loads of my items, made loads of new mates, and calmed down by Saturday morning after spending Friday night drunk and sat around a fire. Was definitely needed. You need to inform them in writing that if it happens again, you'll file harassment charges. You need to inform them in writing that if it happens again, you'll file harassment charges. You have the documentation to do so, even if they've sworn that it'll never happen again. They've said that before. And our next story. Jailbird uncle demands more money. Bit of a long one for you. Just a bit of background. My uncle's been in jail off and on for probably 3/4 of my life, and I'll be 40 this year. Usually it was just pure idiocy that landed him behind bars, Once he broke into a house and fell asleep on their couch. Another time it was something like public drunkenness in Utah on a non-drinking day or something. At that point, I wasn't paying attention to what exactly landed him in jail. It was just an, oh, Uncle's in jail again and move on with life thing. But this last time, he got drunk and beat a man almost to death. Sentence, 20 years. Other random facts that come into play. Uncle had 2 kids. Uncle was divorced but failed to pay child support, so had a huge child support bill due. That child support bill? If Uncle ever had too much money at once, because his money was watched by the prison system, it could be seized to repay the back child support. Anyway, on to the long story. This went on for about a decade, so a few things might be out of order, but all the key parts are there. So it's the late aughts, and Uncle is already in prison for beating this dude. Then my grandfather on that side, who'd previously been subsidizing my uncle in prison, had a stroke, and for a few days it was pretty touch and go. My dad flies out, and it's obvious that if Grandpa lives, he's going to have to go into a nursing home. Grandpa's sister and my dad are there and decide they need to get Grandpa to get his will together. They have an attorney come to the hospital, and the will gets written, witnessed, etc. Now, yes, Grandpa had just had a stroke, but his mind was still fully there. His mind was good until the day he died. At this point, I have to mention 2 things. 1, Grandpa owed Dad about $20,000, so the will was structured to treat that as separate somehow. And 2, Grandpa told Dad not to give my uncle money in prison. Anyway, in the will, my grandpa left everything to my dad. Nothing to the grandchildren, this comes up later, and nothing to my uncle. My dad and Grandpa's sister actually asked about my uncle, and Grandpa replied that he'd bailed him out of jail so many times, even adding an extra mortgage once, if I recall, and sent him so much spending money for prison that in his eyes, my uncle had already received his inheritance. Now, we were still on speaking terms with Uncle after Grandpa's stroke, and even though he was not told to, my dad started sending the monthly spending money, which I believe was $50 then, and after a couple years went up to $75. A year later, Grandpa passed. We called the prison to let Uncle know, and in a subsequent letter, he was informed there was nothing for him in the will. My parents did put a token amount into a bond for him anyway. About 3 years passed, during which time my parents continued to send a monthly stipend to my uncle. Then Uncle calls with some excuse for why he needs more money. My parents call BS and tell him that they're not sending anything extra. Uncle gets pushier, and my parents finally tell him that they'll cash out the bond they set aside for him, but there will be nothing for him when he gets out. Uncle takes the money, but still demands an increase in his monthly amount. He's once again told no. He's getting free money, and if he needs more, he should get a job in the prison. At some point around this same time, one of my cousins died. The other cousin died a couple years later. Uncle argues that cousin's inheritance should revert to him, arguing that Grandpa had to have left some money to his precious grandchildren, neglecting the fact that none of the grandchildren were included, and even if they were, it would have been paid out years earlier. When my parents sent ex-aunt money to help with funeral costs, Uncle's mad because he thinks that money should have gone to him for grieving or something. Fast forward several months, there have been rumblings of Uncle demanding money from other people we know, which is pissing everybody off. But this is the way he operates, and everybody's a tiny bit forgiving because his eldest kid just died. Then ex-aunt forwards us a letter in which Uncle asks her to lie for him and state that there was a previous will by my grandparents that included him. There wasn't. At the same time, we're notified that Uncle is suing my parents, contesting Grandpa's will, and demanding almost 5 times the amount of the entire inheritance. Note, he was able to claim indigent status, so filing fees and such were waived. It's at this point my parents cut him off, pretty sure that their own money has been used to buy favors in prison that helped Uncle put together the lawsuit. Now, the lawsuit was full of ridiculous allegations, claiming that Grandpa had been coerced into making a new will while mentally weak due to the stroke, that my parents had abused my grandpa, that the estate was worth far more than it was because of antiques and such, LOL, old doesn't mean valuable, that my parents were willfully withholding the contact information of family members who would back up his claims. Nope, they begged us not to give him their details because they knew he'd demand money, and as many lies as he thought he could get away with. Enter lawsuit number 1, filed in the state Grandpa lived in before his stroke and where the will was written. Was quickly dismissed on jurisdiction grounds as Uncle didn't live there, My parents don't live there, and Grandpa didn't die there because my parents brought him to a nursing home in our state so he wouldn't have to be alone. Enter lawsuit number 2. About 9 months or so after lawsuit number 1, Uncle refiled in the state he's incarcerated in. This time it wasn't quickly tossed on jurisdiction grounds, and parents had to get an out-of-state attorney. Eventually, the case was dismissed, but without prejudice. Enter lawsuit number 3. Almost immediately after the case was tossed in the second state, he sues again in the state parents live in and Grandpa died in. Parents have to get an attorney again. This time, Uncle gets it in his head that he'll win and drops the suit, expecting an amicable resolution because he's sick. But at this point, my parents are done and have been no contact for a while. My dad's pissed, and nope, there'll be no amicable resolution, cause F the uncle and his crap. Enter lawsuit number 4. About 6 months after dropping lawsuit number 3, Uncle sues again. This one finally gets to court. A judge looks at everything, including threatening letters Uncle had sent and the letter he'd sent ex-aunt wanting her to lie about another will, etc., and the case is finally tossed with prejudice, meaning no refile. Uncle immediately appeals, but when that finally got to the appeals court, they tossed it pretty quickly. Now the sweet ending. Because all the family and friends watched Uncle run my parents through 4 different frivolous lawsuits because they refused to give him more money, almost everybody has cut ties, and the last I heard, nobody was giving him any money at all. How's the saying go? Don't bite the hand that feeds you? Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.